Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Brenner, Senior Vice President of Custom Content at Cyber Risk Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you to this SC Media in Focus, sponsored by Fortinet. And I am pleased to be joined today, once again, by Derek Manky, Chief Security Strategist and VP of Global Threat Intelligence for Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. And we are going to be talking about threat predictions for 2024. So Derek, welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you again, Bill. I'm always excited this time of year as we look ahead and beyond.
So let's just get right to it. So you have put out a report on predictions, and it talks about chained AI, CaaS, as I call it anyway, CAAS operations, and how these are easy buttons for attackers. And so let's just start right off the top with that. What is the meaning?
Yeah, so um, reducing complexity, and I think what should be clear here, we're being pragmatic about this,
Mm-hmm.
um, as are cyber criminals, I think. This isn't the big, weaponization of AI. We talked about that last year, but it's not the, put everything in the driver's seat, hands off the wheel and let it run, right? And attack systems. That's not the idea here. We've always talked about this evolution of how machine learning models, artificial intelligence can be used as tools, right? And it always starts with automation too. So we have seen lots of weaponization of offensive automation that's been in, exploit packs and in scanning, combining databases from open port scans and all of those things we've seen in the past, certainly phishing kits and all that. So really what we're talking about with easy buttons, if you think of the attack chain, right? So kill chain, but attack chain, each element has a need that can be leveraged by automation, but now also leveraged by tools that are using machine learning models, right? And so the natural piece of that, when we talk about this easy button, what easy buttons are we going to see, right, coming forward? Because we haven't seen a ton of activity in this, which is a good thing yet. But again, it's on the horizon and coming. Things, of course, these are natural ones. We're seeing more of a targeted focus of attacks. So phishing techniques going to spear phishing or whaling, right? After big targets, CXO, CFO, particularly with business email compromise. That is an easy button, right? Because now it becomes something using generative AI, which is specific, which is all the rage and everybody's talking about it, specific to large language models. That's a natural fit, right? Something that can be easy to craft very clever emails that are trying to bypass spam filtering detection, as an example. They won't have the typical red flags that we see, right? Like shady URIs and typos in the emails. So that's one area of an easy button on the spear phishing. Another is AI audio spoofing as well too. So not necessarily the video deepfakes that we all fear, but starting simple with that, just on the audio, especially when you think of, again, business email compromise is one of the biggest threats we see, and how that can be used for, instructions, right, for approvals on accounts and things like that for wire transfers. Yeah, the other one is something, again, has lived in the world of automation with password spraying, password stuffing, credential access, or credential stuffing is one of the biggest techniques we see today. And again, this is where an easy button is going to go a long way to help guessing those passwords versus just dictionary attacks on automation.
So that's the AI piece. In the report, you also talk about the evolution of old favorites. And, well, I mean, AI, of course, is one such evolution. Talk to me about other examples of how old favorites have evolved. So one of the things my brain immediately goes to is the evolution of how ransomware attacks happen,
Yep.
and the corporatization of those attacks. But
Yep.
talk about some of the old favorites as outlined in the report.
Yeah. So speaking of ransomware, there's an interesting tie-in here. One of the ones that really stood out is something going back 2 years. So 2021 to 22, we talked about, we called it bounty hunters back then. But the idea is that basically digital real estate is starting to become more valuable with these targets. So when they get an initial foothold into an organization, there's inherent value with that foothold, right? More value because it used to be infrastructure for botnets, rental, DDoS, crime services. But now, because again, attacks and criminal enterprise, that evolution of ransomware itself has become much more targeted, right? Attacking things like manufacturing, not just going after data encryption, but denial of service and revenue streams and so forth. So what we've reflected on and saw this year was an extension of that. We call it turf wars, right? Because it's
Yep.
basically what we're seeing now is a lot of these initial access brokers that have access to the systems, they've monetized that. They're selling it to the highest bidders, plural, because they want to generate cash, right? Or crypto. And so, in this case, they are selling to more than one prospective buyer in small windows, right? We're talking 24 hours or days. And the net result, of course, is now you have multiple buyers that are getting access to the credentials, right? Active Directory or whatever it is, right? And and using those immediately to deploy to make cash again, right? They're deploying ransom as a service because they're an affiliate in a lot of cases. They get access to these systems. They deploy ransomware. You have more than one ransomware now that's hitting systems within a small period of time. So it's a triple threat in essence, right? The FBI put out a warning about this recently as well too. There's more documented cases of this happening where you have multiple data cryptors running at the same time, which of course is a nightmare because there won't be any key to decrypt that. It's destructive to the system.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to AI just very quickly because that really AI just permeates this whole landscape that we're talking about. And as you know, on Monday, President Biden signed an executive order on AI. Any thoughts on how that could be helpful as we work to uh, defend organizations against AI inspired and engineered threats?
Yeah, I think it's very important. So it's actually a good news story in this case because I've always believed this, but it's more than ever now, right? With more focus, more innovation, all the investment we as an industry have done in the past, so we're primed for actual defensive use cases of AI. We talk about that attack cycle, so the mean time to detect, the mean time to respond that needs to shrink. It has to, because otherwise, with automation and these other tools in hand for cyber criminals, and like I said, even the turf wars thing I was talking about, that's all happening at a rapid pace now. So the risk is
Yep.
higher, and without having proper adoption and that yardstick to push that, we're going to be behind, right? But the good news is we have all these tools; they're available, right? And again, any one of these in that kill chain from a defensive standpoint, defense goes a long way to be able to, again, the simple examples are the humans are slow, right? The mundane day-to-day response from a SOC analyst looking at logs, going and setting up policies, that can take a long time. Those things can easily be automated through machine learning models in a cybersecurity mesh and fabric. And yeah, so, without getting that right now, well, let's put it this
Mhm.
way. We have the opportunity to get it right now, and we can get ahead, right? There's always that arms race. This is our opportunity to get ahead, I believe, because attackers are still following the path of least resistance. They're taking the easy way in a lot of cases, starting to use some of these easy buttons. That's a prediction, but again, we can get ahead of
Yep.
that.
So let's talk about um, fresh threat trends to watch for in 2024 and beyond, which is covered extensively in this report. I feel like that goes beyond just what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes on AI.
Yep.
So take me through the trends that you see, that you're watching, that may not be on the wider InfoSec radar right now, but should be.
Sure. So one thing is on, uh, the playbooks, right? We're seeing a bigger shift on towards true criminal enterprise, deep funded networks. We're seeing attacks becoming much more personal, targeted in nature. So even like the extortion models that we've seen, right? That's so really looking at the TTPs, the tactics, not just the techniques, but the tactics, the overall, which by the way are becoming more like they're sliding completely off the moral scale here. They're becoming more and more and more unethical, right?
Right.
And now what's happening and the prediction here is that we're going to continue to see that trend. Because again, a lot of these predictions they're not just, we're not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. This is like based off of years of experience and educated guesses, right? Based off of the trends. And again, thinking like a cyber criminal enterprise. Um, if I were a cyber criminal, what is my next move given these trends? That's what we're doing here. And yeah, looking at the TTPs, we've seen an expansion of TTPs. Look at MITRE ATT&CK V13 now. There's about 700 techniques and sub-techniques. So that continues to grow. When that grows, it means they're innovating. They're creating new methods on their end to evade security controls to launch these attacks.
Yep.
And so, yeah, we expect that to continue to grow, right? We're going to see more attack frameworks. We're going to see more TTPs from criminal enterprise, but more personal, more targeted. Again, moving beyond. I really think like the data encryption models are going to start to really be put to a backstage, and we're going to see a big lift up and a rise in these personal attacks and the extortion, double extortion schemes as well. The targets as well too. Unfortunately, I know we've talked about this before, but there's been, because of the disruption effect that's happening, we're going to really see more cases, I think, of cyber physical attacks. So we talked about healthcare before, right? Hospitals not being able to function. These are the targets now of these big criminal enterprise. And so, yeah, when we talk TTPs and targets, I think that's where we're going to see much more of a focus in attacks.
Yep.
But Bill, there's a that's the effect. But again, there's always a good news story here. I think we're very focused in the industry on IOCs, right? Or traditionally have been indicators of compromise. There's trillions of those floating around every day, malwares and URIs and hashes and IP addresses and all of that. From a defensive standpoint, we can narrow, and we call this out on the predictions, narrowing the TTP playing field. Yes, that playing field is expanding, but it's like a game of chess. If we focus on the TTPs and have relevant, going back to the AI piece we just talked about, it's a great use case to actually detect and mitigate TTPs. You're literally taking chess pieces off the board from the attackers, and they're not able to grow at the same rate as they can with IOC. So, there's a good prediction also tied into that as well. Moving beyond the TTPs, insider threats, right? This is something I think that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, I'm sorry to talk over you.
No problem.
In the report, you talk about a few things, and you just brought up the inside game.
Yeah.
But the report also talks about it's a new day for 0 days. Playing the inside game as we're about to get a little deeper into, but also you talk in here about we the people attacks.
Yep.
So let's start with the insider part.
Okay. Yeah, so the idea here is that we've seen some recruitment campaigns in the past. Conti is definitely one of them that stood out. But especially given the economy today, there's more, unfortunately, again, more targets for cyber criminals of inside recruitment from organizations, because again, these are criminal enterprise, deeply funded, trying to find other ways of initial access. The perimeter has become, again, a good thing. The perimeter has become much more hardened over the years. It's becoming um, harder to penetrate, and so attackers are looking for other methods, right? And this is definitely one of them. The insider threat traditionally has been misconfigurations and human error and these sorts of things. But this is really the modernized Trojan horse, the way I look at it as well, too, right? Ways that cyber criminals can either use these growing advanced TTPs and spear phishing to try to get a foothold and manipulate and control someone in the inside of an organization, or directly recruit them for cold hard cash, right? So that's on the insider threat risk. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the We the People attacks. So looking ahead, where you see this trend going?
Yeah. So with We the People, the idea here is big event disruption. This is a classic formula, I would say, with a new twist, right? Being that we've always seen cyber criminals specifically, and APT groups, but cyber criminals capitalize on breaking events, right? They're very opportunistic. So natural disasters, hurricanes, relief funds for scams and charity, all these things in the past. With big world scale events, such as the Olympics, we have seen some attacks in the past, but it's been quite limited. Like if you think back to games in South Korea, we had the Olympic destroyer as an example, right? But limited engagement. But now, as these global, given the targeted focus and the advanced persistent cybercrime, so the weaponization of these techniques, basically the capabilities of cybercrime versus just APT now, we're expecting to see cybercrime really latching on to these global scale events. So US elections, it's a big one coming up next year. The Paris Olympics would be another one as well, too. I mean, these are, if you think about it now, becoming more and more integrated with and reliant on technology. And so again, these become natural targets for cyber criminals to move on, which they haven't really done in large scale in the past.
Now, another part in the report that I think we've already covered is the narrowing of the TTP playing field. But talk to me a bit about the making space for more 5G attacks.
Yeah, this one's interesting. So this is, I would say, the beyond prediction, right? So we have some time. But, the idea here is that we have all of the stuff we're talking about with convergence of IT and OT networks here on Earth, right? So, physical grid connection, 5G from carrier, as we all know, right? So radio access networks. That radio access network is already starting to be extended into space. We have the whole space race for LEO, low orbit, Earth orbital satellites. So basically making it commoditized now. We also have now satellites in space today and growing for 5G direct from satellite to cell, meaning you don't need that radio access network on Earth. So when we look at this convergent from especially these big targets now for oil and gas, for forestry, mining, for anything critical infrastructure, a lot of those targets have been offline, off grid, air gapped, if you will. So that we're continuing to move further away from the air gap, and that's what this prediction is about, is that we're going to see more attacks, not directly on the satellite infrastructure itself. Yes, that is another story. But leveraging that, simply just leveraging that infrastructure, routing attacks through space, think showdown, those sorts of things, being able to do port scans for these things that, again, were offline before, but now are conveniently 5G connected for IoT devices, for operational technologies. It's really going to act as a catalyst for that ever expanding attack surface.
Okay. So as you know, I like to end these with kind of a checklist. So for those who are watching us now, who are preparing for 2024, if you could come up with a checklist of what security teams should be doing and focusing on based on priority, what would that be?
Sure. So really focus on that resilient ecosystem. So going back to the easy buttons we talked about before, um, again, this isn't a put everything in place at once. It's a journey, right? So my checklist would be a journey, and it starts simple as always, because any one of these easy buttons that you as an organization can deploy goes a long way to make your ecosystem more resilient. And the net effect of that, again, is that attackers, if it's even a little bit of a entry barrier to try to get into systems, they're going to be going to look at other targets. It's a strategy that works. There is a lot of technology and looking at how to reduce those mundane cycles from a SOC perspective, as an example. There's even managed services. That'd be part of my checklist. If you're just building a SOC, looking at MSSP, looking at SOC as a service, being able to leverage other expertise without building it in-house goes a long way, again, just to help to really detect. The average detection time for threats is still sitting in the hundreds of days in some cases, which is not good enough, right? So again, by taking some of those steps, you can really reduce that mean time to detect. That would be number one, I would say. Moving from detection to response, reducing that mean time to response and contain again. This is where you have looking at simple things like SIM and SOAR and integration within a SOC that can be powered by AI effectively to be able to reduce, again, these mundane cycles that can really reduce that window. That's key, right? And key to part of building that resilient ecosystem. And again, from a people and process level, keeping this front of mind. This has to be a culture. Build a security culture. Have these conversations from the CISO up to the board, so the board understands that it can drive it down into the organization. Just like this posture from Biden that you mentioned as well too. It's the same effect in organizations. That doesn't happen often enough, unfortunately. But yeah, those would be. My third thing is that it's important for organizations to understand that they're actually a critical part. So when we talk about that disruption ecosystem as a whole, we're doing it as a vendor with Cyber Threat Alliance, new frameworks with MITRE. We've talked about Cybercrime Atlas with the World Economic Forum. Those are all things we're doing, but organizations, they actually have a critical part in that ecosystem as well too. And it comes back to this resiliency, incident reporting. We need to know more about what's happening with attackers so that we can defend, right? It's all part of that ecosystem.
I haven't asked you about yet, but that you think is important to cover as well.
Well, yeah. So this would just be another interesting one to me. We haven't talked about. And again, this is something that's been happening for some time, but it goes back to the follow the money. So something interesting on money laundering that we predicted last year and we saw this year was with crypto mixers and tumblers and effectively services. So money laundering services that have been set up to wash crypto, to add more of that spider web when it comes to hiding the trace. It can always be traced, but the more layers obviously of obfuscation that are added, it becomes more difficult. And that's a practice we've seen with cyber criminals. And the interesting thing is we actually saw a criminal exchange set up this year, a crypto exchange from the KillNet group. So again, something I think that we should, it's just a root cause, right? Something as the industry is facing that we can expect to see more of next year. And again, from a disruption standpoint, this is actually what we're targeting and looking at with efforts like Cybercrime Atlas.
In 2024, be safe out there. Make sure your mute button is not going off without your authorization or actions. And Derek, always great to talk to you. Love going through these reports. They're very well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a great conversation, and it's it's always good to look ahead and be prepared, right? Like I said, there's opportunity here for us as the industry and defenders. So
yeah. Well, until next time, my friend.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Take care.
Well.